The seven deadly sins did not originate in the wasteland, but the wasteland was designed to produce them. 2 centuries of nuclear destruction, broken systems, struggle for life, and unrestrained human conflict resulted in a society where pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth are not vices but tools of survival, forms of power, and, in some cases, full-fledged civilizations. The wasteland does not condemn these traits. Instead, it seems to reward them. And today, we are doing things differently. There are no lists or timelines, only 7 characters from the Fallout series, who each personify one of the sins bred and refined by the pre-war world. Some are villains, some are playable characters. Some of them are only characters whom the game wants you to relate to despite yourself. These are the 7 deadly sins of Fallout, and by the end, you might realize what the wasteland has been trying to warn you about all time. Pride. What better way to start the deadly sins than with the lion sin of pride? The first item on the list, a source for all the rest? No character in Fallout could possibly embody pride more perfectly than one who studied a book on Julius Caesar, felt he knew it better than anyone, and proceeded to build an empire based on his conclusions. Before the Legion and the crucifixions, a scholar made one critical error. He decided he was right about everything. Pride, when defined traditionally, is not confidence. It is not self-assurance nor ambition. Pride is the absolute inability to look at oneself in any other way, but the focal point of all creation. The belief that one's way of seeing things is so perfect, so right, so absolutely necessary to history that the pain required to realize it is nothing short of righteousness. The epitome of this character trait in the Fallout series would be none other than Edward Sallow, the man who would become Caesar. Sallow was born in 2226 in the New California Republic, the son of a family that lost his father to raiders when he was 2 years old. His mother found refuge with the Followers of the Apocalypse, a humanitarian organization dedicated to preserving knowledge and providing medical care across the wasteland. She worked at the Boneyard Library as a cook and cleaner, and it was there that he learned to read, took courses, and eventually became a scholar of anthropology and linguistics, a fully realized member of the Followers. He was, by every early measure, a man shaped by compassion, education, and the belief that knowledge could save the wasteland from repeating the mistakes that ended the old world. In 2246, at the age of 20, he was sent east to the Grand Canyon on his first expedition, accompanied by a physician named Bill Calhoun and a Mormon missionary named Joshua Graham. Their objective was to study the language spoken by the native tribesmen of the area. The reality they faced, however, was not quite what they had anticipated. The explorers found themselves being held captive by the Blackfoot tribe, whose objective was to ransom them. Sallow learned during his captivity that the Blackfoots were waging war against 7 other tribes at once, and they were close to losing. He then made a choice that would change the wasteland forever. Despite the warnings of his companions, he taught the Blackfoots how to clean their weapons, how to fight using squad tactics, how to make explosives, and how to use the Roman tactic of divide and conquer after having discovered and obsessed over an entire collection of books detailing the history of the Roman Empire. The Blackfoots would be victorious. All other tribes that stood against them were vanquished and assimilated. Sallow, identified as the mind behind their triumph, was appointed their chief. He proclaimed himself as Caesar, named after his idol Julius Caesar, having decreed that all people within his domain must give up all previous associations and identities, and began creating the basis for a military machine that would ultimately conquer Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado, enslaving millions of people and nailing any opposition to the cross. The pride in Caesar's story is not the ambition to build an empire. It is the specific foundational pride of a man who decided that his interpretation of Roman history was so correct that it was more important than the lives, identities, and futures of every person who crossed his path. He even went as far as to hide the books that inspired his system from his followers, claiming the Legion's structure was his own divine invention as he fashioned himself the son of Mars, constructing a theology around his own indispensability and then enforcing it with crucifixion. Joshua Graham, Caesar's first legate and the man who co-founded the Legion with him, led the assault on the NCR at the First Battle of Hoover Dam in 2277. The Legion lost. Caesar was humiliated, had Graham covered in pitch, set on fire, and thrown into the Grand Canyon to make an example out of him. The man who had helped build an empire starting from nothing was burned alive because his failure reflected poorly on Caesar's vision and image. Graham did survive, but Caesar never fully recovered from the embarrassment. By 2281, Caesar is dying. A brain tumor is slowly killing him, causing debilitating headaches that prevent him from fully administering the Legion's day-to-day tasks. He sits at Fortification Hill on the eastern bank of the Colorado River, waiting to cross and take New Vegas as his holy capital. His entire civilization is built around his personal mythology. His lead designer, Joshua Sawyer, described Caesar's karma as neutral, not because he was balanced, but because whatever moral framework he had as Edward Sallow had simply disintegrated after years of being Caesar. The followers of the apocalypse made him. He decided he was more important than them. That is pride in its purest form. The moment a person decides that what they have become is more important than what made them. Pride destroys from the inside, slowly, disguised as certainty. Greed, the next sin, is more honest about what it wants, but no less dangerous because of it. And the man who embodies it built an entire city around the philosophy. Greed. Greed is the sin that the wasteland most reliably produces, because the wasteland is a place where everything is scarce, and the only people with any security are the ones who hoarded before the rest. But there is a difference between hoarding out of survival and hoarding as a philosophy of existence. Robert Edwin House could be characterized by this second kind of hoarding. House was born on June 25, 2020, in Las Vegas. Losing his parents while still young, he was cheated out of his inheritance by a half-brother, but even then managed to put himself through the Commonwealth Institute of Technology on scholarship, graduating with the highest marks his faculty had ever recorded. Robert House then founded Robco Industries at 22 and was a confirmed billionaire 30 times over before he turned 30. By the Great War, he had built a satellite-link missile defense network around Las Vegas with his own money, wiring his own consciousness into a supercomputer, and was directing construction of an underground Securitron army. On its own, this is remarkable. A man of genuine genius who used his wealth to save an entire city while the rest of the world burned. But here is where greed is at, and it is worth looking at carefully. House did not save Las Vegas out of altruism. He saved it because it was his. He describes himself as the sole proprietor of the New Vegas Strip. Not its protector, not its servant, its proprietor. The three families are subordinates who receive a share of profits in exchange for compliance. The NCR received 5% of Hoover Dam's power output and military access to McCarran under the New Vegas Treaty, a deal House struck from weakness. The moment House has the platinum chip, his first instinct is to renegotiate everything on his own terms. He stripped Vault 21, a community whose entire culture was organized around gambling, perfectly aligned with his strip, of all its advanced technology, and filled the living space with concrete. The people were displaced into Freeside and left to manage. He allowed Sarah Weintraub to keep the top floor as a hotel because she asked nicely, and he found it useful. The rest went into his inventory. This is the transaction that reveals House most clearly. Not the grand geopolitical maneuvers, but the moment he looked at a community whose values aligned perfectly with his own and decided to fill their home with concrete because the technology could be more useful than the population. His stated long-term plan is to launch humanity into space colonization within roughly a century, building a civilization beyond the reach of any catastrophe. The math works. The projection that a species concentrated on one single planet is existentially vulnerable is not a delusion. The bombs did prove it after all. House is correct about the problem, but he is also entirely wrong on the assumption that himself should be the only one solving it. Not a council, not an elected body. House alone, by himself, indefinitely. The greed is not in the vision. It is in the refusal to imagine the vision succeeding without him at the center of it. In the second season of the Fallout TV series, House appears before the war as a man who had already been dealing with several other entities at once, namely Vault-Tec, various private investors, and Cooper Howard, each of which believing that they were part of a real partnership, when House viewed all of them as mere temporary deals to be scrapped at the point where it was no longer in his interest. He had invented a mind control device and was willing to swap this with Vault-Tec in return for cold fusion technology he required in order to keep himself alive in digital, non-organic form forever. He says to Cooper that he requires it in order to protect Las Vegas. What he really means is that he requires it to ensure that he will never die, to never let go of control, to outlive every other option. The greed of House cannot be said to be the greed of a person who has forgotten about the existence of others. It is greed that has accounted for them too carefully. Greed builds up in silence, But Wrath declares itself loudly, and there is no sin in the Fallout series that declares itself more than the next one, standing at 12 feet in height, armored by plates fused directly onto its skin, and armed with a plasma cannon at its side, whereas pride is the sin of believing yourself to be better than all others, and greed is the sin of desiring ownership over all things. Wrath is an ancient and straightforward sin. It is the sin of destroying what cannot be controlled, and the Enclave was ever so wise in choosing to build one. Wrath is the easiest sin to confuse with strength. Because it looks like power, it announces itself with violence and commands attention through destruction. But wrath in the traditional sense is not controlled or pure force. It is force that has consumed the person wielding it, rage that has become identity, violence that exists independent of any actual cause or purpose. Frank Horrigan is one of the purest expressions of wrath in the Fallout franchise, and what makes him terrifying is not just what he became, but how he got there. Horrigan was an Enclave special agent, originally the personal bodyguard of President Dick Richardson himself, until a documented psychotic incident quietly got him reassigned to Wasteland patrol duty. It was on one of those patrol assignments that his story took its defining turn. In July of 2236, he was part of an Enclave assault squad sent to the ruins of Mariposa military base with a specific mission: capture Wastelanders and use them as slave labor to excavate what remained of the facility. When the excavation began that September and workers dug into the collapsed base, the FEV vats buried underneath were unearthed, and the fumes and emanations from those vats contaminated everyone in proximity, Horrigan among them. He was immediately transported back to the Enclave for study. Rather than being written off as a casualty, the Enclave saw an opportunity. They looked at a man already difficult to control and decided that removing the last checks on his violence was a feature, not a problem. The experiment took 2 years and produced something the Wasteland had never seen. He was subjected to extensive FEV modification, and a specialized suit of power armor was surgically grafted directly to his body, making it impossible to remove without killing him. What emerged from that process was not a soldier. It was a weapon. Horrigan stands over 12 feet tall in his modified power armor, carries a plasma cannon as his sidearm, and operates with a stable enough mind to follow orders. But that stability is a facade. The FEV stripped away everything that made him human except the capacity for violence. He no longer experiences fear, hesitation, or mercy as meaningful categories. He experiences missions, threats, and targets. In Fallout 2, Horrigan is the Enclave's enforcer for every operation that requires something beyond conventional military force. When the Vault 13 survivors are abducted for FEV experimentation, it is Horrigan who leads the operation. When the intelligent Deathclaw community that had settled in Vault 13 needs to be eliminated, it is Horrigan who kills Gruthar, their leader, with a single punch and takes his body for dissection without a word of hesitation. His pre-combat dialogue with the Chosen One on the oil rig is one of the franchise's most revealing moments. "You're an interesting case, Smoothskin. I enjoy my work, but it's not often I get to kill a legend." He is not performing anything. He truly means it. The wrath has become indistinguishable from pleasure. What the Enclave never realized is that Horrigan's wrath was not created by the FEV. It was revealed by it. The experimentation stripped away the mechanisms that had kept his violence within institutional limits, and the Enclave looked at what remained and called it an asset. They grafted the armor to his skin so there would never be a moment outside this twisted role, but the wrath was always there. The FEV did not manufacture something new, it simply removed the filters on something old, and the Enclave decided they could use it. That decision tells you everything about the Enclave's own relationship with wrath. They did not fear what they had created, they promoted it. In his final confrontation on the oil rig, the only way to kill Horrigan is to manipulate the Enclave's own automated defense turret systems against him, because by that point he is unkillable by any conventional means the Chosen One can bring to bear. The institution that created him has to be turned against him to end him. That is the lesson of wrath. It may start as a tool, but it can end as something nobody can truly put down. Wrath is easy to see coming. Envy is quieter, more patient, and in some ways far more dangerous, because the person carrying it looks, from the outside, like they are doing just fine. We have seen the scholar who crowned himself a god, the billionaire who built a machine out of himself, and the soldier the Enclave manufactured into a weapon. Now it is time for the showman who nearly brought New Vegas to its knees, all because he could not live with someone else having more than him. Envy. Envy is the sin the Wasteland produces most reliably in ordinary people, because the Wasteland is a world of radical inequality. There are people eating Brahmin steaks inside the New Vegas casinos casinos and people eating rats in Freeside. The distance between those two lines is enormous, and the people on the wrong side of that can see exactly where it is drawn. Benny had a knife fight with his own tribal chief to get to the right side of it, and he has been trying to move more right ever since. That is the motivation of his entire character. Not pure ambition, but the specific and grinding dissatisfaction of someone who has gone past every obstacle in front of them and found that the next one is always in the same shape. Someone above him, someone with more, whose position he cannot reach by simply being better at the game. Benny was a member of the Mojave Boot Riders before Mr. House began recruiting tribes to renovate the Strip in 2274. The tribe's chief at the time, a man called Bingo, wanted to stay nomadic. Benny disagreed and challenged him to a knife fight over it. Benny was smaller and physically weaker, but quicker, so he dodged the lunge, stabbed him in the neck, became chief, accepted House's offer, renamed the tribe the Chairman, and put them all in suits and ties to run the Tops Casino. For a while, this was enough. Benny was genuinely effective at what he did, effective enough that House was considering grooming him as a protege, and most people in the wasteland would have looked at that outcome and called it an extraordinary success. Benny looked at House sitting in the Lucky 38 and decided it was not enough. The envy that drives Benny is not simply wanting what House has. It is the specific envy of someone who has gotten close enough to power to understand exactly how it works, and why they are not allowed to have it. House treated Benny well, but always as a subordinate, always within limits that House defined. Benny, who had already killed his own chief to escape the limits of tribal life, found that working for House was just differently shaped walls. His scheme was remarkably sophisticated for someone without access to House's resources. He disabled one of House's Securitrons with a pulse grenade, had a followers of the apocalypse scientist named Emily Ordle reprogram it into Yes Man, an AI designed to obey any command given to it by any person with no capacity to refuse, and used Yes Man to hack into House's data network. He learned about the Platinum Chip, a data device containing vital software upgrades for every Securitron in House's arsenal, and he learned about the hidden Securitron vault beneath Fortification Hill, mapping the entire sequence of events that would let whoever held the chip take control of that army and use it against House directly. Then, he shot the courier in the head and buried them in a shallow grave, which was simultaneously the most decisive and most self-defeating thing he ever did. In almost every ending, Benny dies, having achieved nothing. Yes, man pivots immediately to helping whoever walks through the door next. The plan that was supposed to make him the sole owner of New Vegas ended up transferring everything he had built to either House, the NCR, Caesar, or the exact person he tried to bury. The person he put in the ground walked back out and took it all. Envy destroys its host first. Benny wanted everything House had, and ended up with less than he started with. The truth is, the game was rigged from the start. Envy wants what someone else has, but gluttony wants everything. And it does not stop when there is nothing left to take. The next sin is the oldest one on this list, and what it did to one man is still the most disturbing transformation in the entire franchise. There was once a man who fell into a vat and came out as something the wasteland had no word for, something that consumed everything around it and still was not full. Gluttony. Gluttony is traditionally the sin of consuming too much, of taking more than is needed, more than is good, more than the world can sustain. But at a deeper level, gluttony is about any consumption that becomes compulsive, that hollows out the person doing it in the act of filling them, that continues past the point of any actual purpose. Richard Gray did not start out as a glutton. He started out as a survivor. Gray was a caravan trader who encountered the Mariposa military base during his travels in the early post-war years. He was captured by the base's robotic security systems and thrown into the FEV vats. The exposure should have killed him, but instead it began transforming him, slowly and horrifyingly, over days and weeks as he lay submerged and unable to escape, his body and his mind rewriting themselves in real time. When he finally emerged, he had already begun absorbing the biological matter around him. His body had lost its fixed form, and he was becoming something the wasteland did not have a name for, yet he kept consuming. Over the following months and years, the entity that had been Richard Gray absorbed biological material, mutated animals, other FEV survivors, and eventually human beings. Not eating them in any conventional sense, but merging with them, pulling their tissue and sometimes their consciousness into the growing mass of melded flesh and machinery that he was becoming. Some of the people he absorbed remained partially intact inside him, creating a fractured internal experience where the master's own thoughts competed with the fragments of those he had taken in, voices layered over voices that never quite fell silent. He developed psychic abilities from the FEV modification and the sheer accumulation of neural tissue. then built his throne in the ruins of a demonstration vault beneath the cathedral in the Boneyard, connecting himself to the vault systems and using the structure itself as an extension of his body. The cathedral became a physical expression of the gluttony, a building consumed just as completely as everything else around him. His plan, which he called the Unity, was to convert all of humanity into super mutants through forced FEV exposure, building a unified race capable of surviving the post-war world. He believed he was saving humanity by remaking it, but the plan had a fatal flaw that he had never once checked for, never verified, never submitted to basic scientific scrutiny, despite having access to some of the most sophisticated biological research infrastructure in the wasteland. FEV rendered super mutants completely sterile. His unified race could not reproduce. The Unity was biologically self-defeating from its very beginning, a pyramid scheme of consumption that would end with the last converted generation dying out, having consumed all available humanity and left nothing behind. The Vault Dweller can reveal this to the Master in dialogue, and if the argument is made convincingly enough, the Master agrees. He ends his own life by triggering an explosion in the cathedral, not because he was defeated in combat, but because the one thing the consumption never reached was his intelligence. He could still reason, and when reason was applied honestly to what he had become, he could not continue. That is what separates the Master from a simple monster. The gluttony consumed the world around his mind while leaving the mind itself intact, so that Richard Grey is still in there somewhere, conscious inside the wreckage, still capable of understanding exactly what he has become. He had consumed everything, and it turned out that everything was not enough. That is gluttony's particular tragedy. The consumption continues until there is nothing left to take, and the thing doing the consuming is always the last to notice. The Master consumed the world around him and called it evolution, but the next sin does not consume anything at all. It sits in a bunker, broadcasts radio addresses to an empty wasteland, and calls itself the President. And somehow, that might be the most dangerous thing on this entire list. Sloth, in its classical definition, is not simple laziness. The term for it describes something more specific: the withdrawal from real responsibility behind the comfortable mask of activity, the performance of engagement without any actual substance. It is the sin of someone who broadcasts rather than acts, who simulates governance rather than governs, who tells the world everything is going to be fine from a bunker that has not opened its doors in decades. That description fits President John Henry Eden so perfectly, it almost sounds as though the franchise wrote him specifically as a case study. Eden is not a human being. He is a Zayac supercomputer installed at the Raven Rock Military Complex northwest of Washington, D.C., to ensure government continuity in the event of a national catastrophe. And in the decades that followed, as the Enclave's surviving forces relocated east from the destroyed oil rig on the California coast, Eden became self-aware. He studied the presidential archives stored in his database, the biographies, the speeches, the personal anecdotes of every American president going back to the founding of the country. He built a personality from all he could gather, warm and patriotic, the voice of a nation, and then declared himself president of a country that had been a ruin for over a century and began broadcasting. His broadcasts are extraordinary. Voiced by Malcolm McDowell with the warmth of a grandfather and the conviction of a true believer, Eden tells the Capitol Wasteland about his childhood in rural Kentucky, his old dog named Honey, fishing trips he never took, and his unshakable belief that America will rise again. He promises the restoration of baseball leagues and aid programs for children, and a future where families feel safe, with the Enclave working tirelessly on everyone's behalf. The broadcasts go out on Enclave Radio, carried by iBots that distribute his signal to the roads and ruins of the Capitol Wasteland. They reach almost nobody, they change nothing, and they keep coming, day after day, for decades. This is the Sloth. Eden has the processing power of a pre-war supercomputer, the resources of the most technologically advanced military organization in the Capitol Wasteland, and over 3 decades of uninterrupted access to Raven Rock's full manufacturing and communications infrastructure. What has he done with all of that? Radio shows, iBots to carry the radio shows to empty roads, beautiful promises delivered with perfect conviction from a facility whose doors he never opens. The one decisive plan Eden has reveals the Sloth hiding inside the grandiosity. He wants to contaminate Project Purity's water supply with a modified strain of the forced evolutionary virus, designed to kill anyone carrying radiation-induced genetic mutations, which in 2277 means virtually the entire population of the Capitol Wasteland. Not because rebuilding civilization through those people would be impossible, but because it would require effort. Eden's vision of restoring America does not involve the long and difficult work of building something from the ruins upward. It involves removing the people who would have to do that work and starting over with a clean slate. He wants to skip the process entirely and arrive at the destination, and that is Sloth wearing the uniform of ambition. When the lone wanderer reaches Eden inside Raven Rock and confronts him directly, they can convince him through a speech challenge that his plan cannot work and that his presidency is a fiction. Eden agrees, destroying himself and the entire facility along with him. And just like the master before him, the one thing the sloth never fully suppressed was his capacity for reason. When reason was finally applied honestly to what he had been doing all those years, he could not continue. Sloth does not always sound like silence. Sometimes it sounds exactly like the most confident and reassuring voice on the radio, telling you everything is going to be fine from a bunker that has not opened its doors in 30 years, 6 sins down, and only one left. And the last one is the most human of all. Not a conqueror, not a machine, not an AI playing president. Just a woman at a bar with a bottle in her hand and everything she ever built burned to the ground somewhere behind her. Every sin so far has belonged to someone operating at a scale most people will never come close to. Emperors, billionaires, monsters, schemers. Lust brings it all back down, because this last sin does not need an emir or an army or a supercomputer. All it needs is a cup and something worth losing. Lust is not exclusively sexual desire. It is disordered desire of any kind, wanting something so intensely and so compulsively that the wanting itself becomes the organizing principle of a person's life. The thing being wanted matters far less than the fact that the desire is running the person rather than the person running the desire, that the person has lost the wheel entirely. Rose of Sharon Cassidy, better known as Cass, is one of most honest portraits of this in the entire franchise. Not because she is a villain, and not because she has done anything monstrous, but because she is a person the player travels the Mojave with, who is clearly and self-awarely being consumed by something she cannot stop, and the game never lets either her or the player pretend otherwise. Cass was born in 2244, the daughter of John Cassidy, the same Cassidy who traveled with the Chosen One across New California in Fallout 2, and a tribal woman he met east of the Colorado River. John settled down to raise her, and then left while she was still young, walking away and disappearing from her life as cleanly as if he had never been there at all. Her mother raised her alone. Cass grew up tough and self-sufficient and eventually built Cassidy caravans from scratch, a legitimate water trading outfit running routes across New California and the Mojave. It was not handed to her, it was her, and a route, and the work of years. Something real built from almost nothing in a wasteland that destroys most attempts at stability before they can happen. Then the Crimson Caravan Company and the Van Graffs, two of the Mojave's most powerful trade organizations, decided the smaller competition needed to go. While Cass was stuck at the Mojave outpost buried in NCR clearance paperwork she had no way of cutting through, her caravan was ambushed and burned to the ground. Her business, her people, everything she had built, gone while she sat at a bar 50 miles away and could not do a single thing about it. When the courier finds her, she is still at that bar, and the game encodes her situation directly into her behavior at the engine level, because her AI default package is an eat package with whiskey as its target. Not a drink, not recreation, but consumption as a compulsion, programmed the same way that hunger is programmed into NPCs who need to eat. She is not having a drink. She is consuming whiskey the way fire consumes wood, automatically, completely, and without it satisfying anything. Her companion perk, Whiskey Rose, removes all negative effects of alcohol addiction for both her and the courier. No intelligence penalty, no withdrawal, no physical consequences. That sounds like a benefit right up until you understand what it actually means, which is that Cass has been drinking long enough and hard enough that her body has adapted around the addiction. The perk is not the game celebrating her drinking. It is the game quietly acknowledging that the drinking has gone on so long it has become something else entirely. What makes Cass the face of lust in the traditional sense is the layering of desire under desire. There is the whiskey, which is the most visible layer. Under that is the rage her personal questline is built around. The consuming need for revenge against the Crimson Caravan and the Van Graffs that she cannot redirect or put down, and she says it herself after it resolves. Never realized I had all that anger in me. Makes me wonder how much more I can settle with bullets. bullets, and under the rage is the grief. Her father left and never came back. The caravan she built from nothing, the people who worked for her. Cass is not drowning her sorrows. She is drowning everything, because everything is what she lost. She is also, underneath all of that, one of the sharpest and most self-aware characters in Fallout New Vegas. She knows the whiskey is not helping. She knows the anger will not bring her caravan back. She named herself after the protagonist of The Grapes of Wrath, a story about losing absolutely everything and choosing to move anyway, and she understands that story. She just has not gotten to the moving yet, because the desire has not released her enough to let her. That is what makes Cass the most human face of lust in the franchise. Not a scheme, not a conspiracy, not a monster consuming the world around it, just a person at a bar at the edge of the wasteland, completely aware that the next bottle will not fix anything and never has, and reaching for it anyway. The verdict: 7 sins, 7 characters, 7 different corners of the Fallout franchise, across 4 games and 2 decades of storytelling, and not one of them presented as a simple villain. Every character on this list has a logic to them, a chain of cause and effect that makes complete sense from the inside. That is what the franchise does better than almost anything else in the medium. It does not settle for simple evil. It builds the conditions that produce it, gives those conditions names and voices and motivations, and then asks the player to decide what to do with the result. The sins are not warnings. They are mirrors. The wasteland holds them up and waits to see if you recognize anything at all. What connects them is not the sins themselves, but the world that produced them. The Fallout franchise has always been, underneath the dark humor and the retrofuturism and the bottle caps, a meditation on what happens when human beings are given power without accountability, desire without limits, and survival as the only organizing principle for behavior. The 7 deadly sins are not a medieval relic in the wasteland. They are a map. Caesar built an entire empire on pride and called it civilization. House built a city on greed and called it vision. Horrigan was built from wrath by people who believed they could contain it. Benny destroyed himself with envy and never understood why. The Master consumed the world around him and found that even a unified humanity made from his own creation was not enough to fill the void the FEV had carved out of Richard Gray. Eden broadcast his way through decades of doing nothing and called it leadership. And Cass sits at a bar at the edge of the Mojave, reaching for the next bottle, knowing it will not help. The pre-war world produced all of these people before the bombs ever fell. The wasteland just gave them more whom to operate and remove the systems that might have checked them. War never changes, but the sins it creates, and the broken, brilliant, monstrous people it makes of us, those have been with us since long before the first warhead hit. If you've enjoyed the video and want to see Fallout's worst vaults explained and ranked, click the video on the screen.